There's a particular quiet that settles in just before the sun commits to the day, a stillness that feels like it belongs only to the old. I sit here in that quiet, a soft cloth in my hand, working polish into a pair of leather shoes that have known me longer than most people have. The smell of the wax is sharp, familiar. Each circular motion is a meditation, a silent conversation with the man I was yesterday and the one I'll be tomorrow. It's a simple act, but it carries the weight of a lifetime's lesson. You learn early on that certain things must be maintained, not for anyone else, but for yourself. You learn that dignity has a cost, and it's paid in small, private installments like this, every single morning. I hold one of the shoes up, letting the faint light catch the deep, honest creases in the leather. They look like wrinkles around a man's eyes, each one earned from a different pressure, a different mile walked. People see the shine, but they don't see the walking. They don't see the effort it takes just to keep them from scuffing on uneven ground. You spend so much time making sure the outside looks respectable, hoping it speaks for the man on the inside. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? You ever get the feeling that the world decides what you are long before you've even had a chance to say a single word? It's a heavy question to carry around, especially when you've been carrying it for most of a century. My name is Harold Eugene Mitchell. I'm 80 years old now. When you've seen that many seasons turn, you learn that some weights don't get lighter. You just find a different way to hold them. You collect moments like some folks collect stamps or coins, not because they're all valuable, but because they're all part of the set. It's not about having all the answers. Lord knows I have fewer of those now than I did at 30. It's just about paying attention. You sit still long enough, you watch the world turn, and you start to see the threads. It was just last week. My Sarah's birthday was coming up, and even though she's been gone a few years now, I still like to mark the day. I take her favorite flowers to the cemetery and then go have a quiet dinner at the little Italian place we loved. I decided I needed a new hat for the occasion. Something sharp. There's a new men's store downtown, all glass and bright lights, not like the old haberdasheries I remember. It felt a little cold, but they had a fine-looking felt fedora in the window. A young man, barely a man at all, came up to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His voice was too loud, too slow. "Can I help you with anything, sir?" he asked, stretching the words out, as if I'd wandered in from another world and might be easily startled. I've heard that tone my whole life. It's the one people use when they aren't sure you're supposed to be where you are. I simply pointed to the hat in the window. "I'd like to try that one, please. The gray felt." For a moment, just a fraction of a second, The boy hesitated. His eyes darted from my face to the hat and back again. It was a small thing, a pause you could miss if you blinked. But I didn't blink. In that silence, he was weighing me. He finally fetched the hat, handling it with a reverence he hadn't afforded me. He held it out with both hands, like an offering. I took it and placed it on my head, turning to the mirror. It was a good fit, but I wasn't watching myself. In the reflection, I was watching him, and I saw it. His gaze wasn't on this hat. It flickered down to my left hand to the simple gold wedding band I've worn for 57 years. Curious. It's worn thin now, smooth against my skin. His eyes lingered there, and I knew exactly what he was doing. He was performing a silent calculation, trying to make sense of the old black man and the expensive hat. A quiet, cold anger started to rise in my chest. It's an old feeling like a pilot light that never quite goes out. Part of me wanted to ask him, "Son, you see something on my hand that interests you?" I wanted to make him feel as small and as scrutinized as he was making me feel, but what would have been the point? He wouldn't have understood. He would have stammered, apologized for an offense he didn't even realize he'd committed, and I would have just been the angry old man. So I did nothing. I stood there, adjusted the brim, and looked at my own reflection, pretending I hadn't seen a thing. I bought the hat. The transaction was quick and polite. The boy even put it in a handsome box for me, but as I walked out of that bright, cold store, the hat didn't feel like a purchase anymore. It felt like a trophy from a battle I hadn't asked to fight. The simple joy I'd felt, the desire to look my best for Sarah, had been drained out of the moment, replaced by that familiar, heavy exhaustion. The world had decided what I was before I'd said a word, and all I could do was pay the price for the hat and for the silence it took to buy it with my dignity intact. Back then, standing in that store, the silence was deafening. Every part of me wanted to break it, to fill the air with the truth of what was happening. I imagined the words, sharp and clear, asking that boy why my worth was a puzzle he felt he needed to solve. But another voice, one I've known my whole life, whispered a different counsel. It wasn't a voice of fear, not exactly. It was the voice of preservation. It reminded me that my peace is a fragile thing, and some disturbances simply aren't worth the cost of mending it. Today I look back and see the tug-of-war so clearly, the man who wanted to fight and the man who knew the fight was already lost before it began. Sometimes I think about my grandson, David. He's a good boy, but he carries his anger on the outside like a coat he can't take off. He would have said something. He would have called that young man out, made him squirm, and he would have felt righteous in doing so. And a part of me, a deep and tired part, wonders if his way is better. Is my silence just a habit learned from a time when speaking up could cost you more than just a hat? Or is there a wisdom in it that he hasn't learned yet? I sit with that question and I have no answer. Both feel true. The world has changed, but the weight of it feels the same. In the end, you realize the argument you're having isn't with the clerk or the world or anyone else. It's with yourself. You're arguing with the part of you that wonders if they might be right. That's the real poison of it all. For a moment, his doubt becomes your own. So you stand there, you buy the hat, and you walk out. Not because you've won, but because you've chosen which man you're going to be when you're alone again. You choose the one who knows his own value, even if you have to spend the rest of the day reminding him of it. Survival is a quiet, internal thing. It reminds me of a phone call I had with my grandson, David, just the other night. He's a brilliant young man, an architect who designs buildings that seem to touch the sky. He's got a fire in him, a brightness that I pray the world never tries to put out. He called me after a major presentation, his voice tight like a wire. He said he had nailed it, that the clients loved his designs and that the project was his. But there was no joy in his words, only a kind of simmering rage that felt far too familiar to me. He was describing a victory, but all I could hear was the sound of a fresh wound. The problem, he explained, came after the applause died down. The senior client, a man about my age, came over to shake his hand. He put a hand on David's shoulder, smiled a wide, satisfied smile, and said, "Son, you are so articulate, just so well-spoken. Your company must be very proud of you." David told me he just stood there, speechless. He felt the praise land not like a reward, but like a judgment wrapped in a ribbon. It was the surprise in the man's voice that cut him so deep. David wanted to walk away, to tell them to keep their project. His anger is a roaring flame. Mine is an old ember I've learned to tend to. I just listened. I didn't offer him any advice, because what is there to say that he doesn't already know in his bones? In his frustration, I saw a perfect reflection of my own exhaustion leaving that hat store. It's the same invisible weight, just a newer model for a younger generation. The world looked at my grandson's brilliance and was surprised. It looked at my worn wedding band and was surprised. Two different men born in two different worlds, fighting the same quiet battle, just to be seen for who we are, without the filter of someone else's low expectations. The fight looks different, but Lord, it feels just the same. For the longest time, I believed something that felt as solid as the ground beneath my feet. I believed that dignity was a kind of armor you could build piece by piece until it was strong enough to protect you. If I dressed with care, if my shoes were always shined, if my speech was clear and my manners were impeccable, I thought I could make myself bulletproof. I thought I could present a version of Harold Mitchell that the world would have no choice but to respect. It was a young man's idea. I see that now. It was a belief that the world operated on a set of fair rules, and that if you just played the game better than anyone else, you could win their approval. But the world doesn't play by fair rules. It doesn't matter how polished your armor is if the person looking at you has already decided you're not a knight. The small cuts, the little nicks and dents, they still get through. You feel them in a store clerk's hesitation. You hear them in a surprised compliment paid to your grandson. For decades I thought I was failing, that my armor just wasn't strong enough yet. I kept polishing, kept trying to perfect it, believing that one day it would finally be impenetrable. It took me most of my life to understand I had the whole idea backward. The armor wasn't failing to protect me from the world. The truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't knock on the door. It's just sitting there in the room with you one morning and you realize it's been there all along. That dignity, the polished shoes, the straight back, it was never for them, it was for me. It wasn't a shield to keep the world's judgment out. It was the foundation I needed to stand on when that judgment came. It was about making sure that when I was alone, the man I had to face in the mirror was a man I could respect. The world is going to do what it's going to do. The only thing you can truly control is the person you are on the inside. I watch the young ones now, my David and his friends, and I see them walk into rooms full of people who don't look like them. I see them preparing for a test that was never announced. It's in the way they straighten their backs a little too straight, or in the careful way they place their hands on a table as if to claim a small piece of territory. They have a fire in them, a need to prove they belong, but I recognize the quiet negotiation happening behind their eyes. They're asking themselves the same questions I did. How much of me is safe to show here? How much of my light do I have to dim so I don't startle anyone? It's a silent, exhausting calculus that hasn't changed much over the years. Sometimes when I'm just sitting and observing, I notice all the different kinds of silence people carry. There's the angry silence, the one that holds back a storm of words that could burn the whole room down. My grandson knows that one well. Then there's the tired silence, the one that has seen too much to believe a fight is worth the energy it takes. And I wonder about the choices being made in those moments. Are you holding your tongue out of fear, or are you preserving your peace? Is the quiet a sign of defeat, or is it a sign of a deeper strength, a refusal to let someone else's smallness dictate the size of your spirit? It's a question only the person themselves can answer. In the end, it all comes down to the little things you do for yourself when no one else is watching. It's about where you find your footing when the ground feels unsteady. For me, it's the polish on an old pair of shoes. For someone else, it might be the care they take in watering a plant or the way they read a book in the quiet of the morning. These things seem small, but they're not. They are the private, deliberate acts of telling yourself that you have value, independent of what any stranger in a store or any client in a meeting might think. That's the only validation that truly lasts. It's the suit you wear on the inside. I find myself back here in the quiet that comes just before the sun makes up its mind. The same soft cloth is in my hand. The same familiar smell of polish fills the air. I look down at these old leather shoes, the ones that have known my feet for so long, and I see the deep, honest creases in a different light. I used to wonder if the world decided my worth before I ever spoke a word. Now I think that was the wrong question to be asking all along. The world will always try to have its say, to put you in a box of its own making. But these lines in the leather, they aren't a story of what the world did. They are the story of my walking. The hat I bought for Sarah's day is still in its handsome box. It no longer feels like a trophy from a battle I didn't want, nor a burden I was forced to carry. It's just a hat. The real transaction, the one that truly matters, happens right here in this chair. It's the quiet promise I make to myself each morning. You don't do this for them, you do this for you. You do it to remember that you are a man worthy of respect, starting with your own. The world sees the shine on the outside, but the real work, the part that holds you together, is the tireless private act of tending to the man on the inside. That's the only ground you can ever truly call your own. You spend a lifetime tending to the outside of things, don't you? You make sure your collar is straight, your shoes are shined, your words are measured. You build this careful exterior, hoping it will be enough to speak for you, to tell the world that a man of substance is standing before them. You think of it as a shield, a way to protect yourself from the assumptions and the quick, careless judgments that can cut so deep. You believe that if you just present yourself perfectly, you can force respect to come your way. But the world doesn't work like that. It will see what it wants to see, no matter how well you are dressed. It took me 80 years to understand the truth of it. All that effort, all that care, it was never for them. It wasn't about convincing anyone of my worth. It was about reminding myself. The shine on the shoes, the sharp crease in a pair of trousers, that's not a costume you put on for the world. It's a private ritual. It's the way you tell yourself every single morning that you matter. It's the way you build your own foundation so that when the world tries to tell you that you are small, you have a place to stand. Dignity is the suit you wear on the inside. I suppose we all have something like that, don't we? An object we tend to, not for the eyes of others, but for what it reminds us of on the inside. For me, it will always be these old shoes. They've carried me through more than just miles of pavement. They hold the quiet, private story of a man simply trying to stand tall in a world that often wants you to stoop. It makes me wonder about the things other folks hold on to. What is that one thing you've kept with you? The one that holds a piece of your own long walk? If you feel like sharing, I imagine there's a whole lot of life to be found in those memories. I'd be honored to listen.